Today we're joined by Dr. Rhonda Garad. Rhonda recently quit the Greens and is now representing Greater Dandenong Council as an independent councillor. Her position on the Gaza genocide has brought her into contention with her local government. Rhonda comes on to discuss how the genocide in Gaza has pervaded down through politics into local government, how it affects the daily interactions of our society. She shares with us some of the reasons why she recently left the Greens and explores some of the frustrations and hopes she has for change in Australian society. Without any further ado, Dr. Rhonda Garad. Dr. Rhonda Garad, how are you today?
I'm really, really great, all things considering. Yeah, I'm pretty good and really happy to be here.
Thanks for coming on and joining us in this cold garage today. And look, I'd like to sort of get started with a bit of a background about what you do and who you are. I've read up a bit that you have been involved in the health industry for most of your life.
Yeah, so poor kid from the country, and the way to get a bed in the city was to do nursing about 1,000 years ago. So originally started working clinically and then worked in senior management in health, made a switch to public health and ended up in academia for the last eight or so years. So moved around a bit, but pretty much always in health.
No worries. And whereabouts did you grow up rurally? You were saying
A little wheat belt town called Elmore, about 30 k's north of Bendigo, and little Catholic village, cult village. So I think it was, but very parochial, very one view of the world. So yeah, that's it feels like eons ago.
and through your academia, what areas of health have you been focusing on?
So women's health was a large part of it, sort of hormonal women's health. We used to do clinical guidelines for the medical stuff, but I also taught into the master's program in a thing called implementation science, which is really about systems level change, and that was my main focus.
And so you transitioned, you are ever present and involved in health and cited numerously around the country and around the world. But moving on, you went into politics 6 or 7 years ago
Yeah,
there.
well, yeah, that was a side gig. So I joined the local Greens because, I was so worried about climate at the time, and, was asked to stand for local government, was successful in 2020, and then was re-elected last year. So this is my fifth year, second term. And yeah, and I love local government, and I hear you love local government, and it's a great privilege, really.
Yeah, it must be working at that municipality level and seeing those kind of moving parts of society, working alongside people at the grassroots level, something that we may be missing a little bit more from our state and federal politicians these days. But looking at your, and by the way, you also helped out around and were involved in some other campaigns in the federal campaigns as well, right? In Bruce?
Mhm. Yeah, look, when you belong to a local branch, you stand. Somebody draws a short straw and stands. In state and federal campaigns, it's Greens policy to stand in every seat. So I think I've stood in 2 federal and 1 state election. But I have recently left the Greens as of 2 weeks ago. Yeah, I did leave the Greens.
So let's start off with just earlier this year. Was it a month or so ago? Greater Dandenong Council accused you of anti-Semitic language in your social media posts. Can you just sort of give us the context of these posts and your response to the accusations?
So I put up a ceasefire motion in local council in November 23, and from that time, I've caught the eye of a Zionist kind of network, and so frequently the Herald Sun, give me a call and accuse me of various things. Recently, they called me and asked me if I was anti-Semitic because of my tweets, and my tweets were very much focused on Israel, Netanyahu, the IDF, and asked me if I was anti-Semitic, and which, I denied and said I very much stood by my tweets. It's my Twitter account they keep very close tabs on. And they also contacted the council and said, what do you think about Councillor Garad's tweets? Do you think she's anti-Semitic? And the normal protocol for a council is to say, Councillor Garad is an independent, political practitioner. That is what she says is her business. We neither endorse or disendorse. So that's the standard protocol. But for some reason, and I've never heard any council do this before, the council decided to go further, and they said, and they published, they sent this to the Herald Sun, that I'd crossed over to anti-Semitic language, and that, and in fact, I crossed over to bullying, vilification, harassment. I'd gone the whole 9 yards, and this was unprecedented and really disturbing.
And so we are seeing these unprecedented steps being taken at state and federal levels as well, with regards to responding to perceived anti-Semitism. Now, there was an IHRA definition adopted of anti-Semitism adopted by the council, right?
No, it never has. But so we've never. So the way council functions is the councillors determine policy, and the executive and officers carry that out. We've never considered a definition, so it's never come to council. But when you look at what they wrote, clearly they're working within the HERA definition, because they're saying that any criticism of Israel or any actions of Israel and so on are anti-Semitic. So clearly, whether they're actually conscious of that or not, but that's kind of the definition they're working within to make that determination. So they made that determination themselves. So they sat there and decided that my tweets were anti-Semitic, and took it upon themselves to publish that, and to go further and say that I had crossed the line to vilification, harassment, bullying. So it's pretty clear that that's their worldview. And why I find that really disturbing, not only that it's contrary to the federal, Justice Stewart's finding a couple of weeks ago that it's not anti-Semitic to criticise Israel, IDF, and Zionism, but they, if they are working in that with that definition, then how are the staff going there that may have pro-Palestinian views? And we've got one of the highest Middle Eastern population, very high Muslim population, very high pro-Palestine population. Are they within the council also holding that standard or that line with their staff? And also operationally, if a pro-Palestine group is applying for a permit, are they also applying the HERA? It's deeply concerning that they may be applying this across the board, particularly in Dandenong.
Yeah, that's right. With quite a large, the largest Afghan community in Victoria within that municipality, and a large Islamic community, right?
Yeah, massive, massive.
So there we go. You have a council sitting down and deliberating on what the definition of anti-Semitism is in regards to your specific social media posts. These are, you've argued that these are defamatory actions, right? That have, mischaracterized your criticism of Israel and the IDF as anti-Semitism. So how do we move? How are you moving forward with these negotiations at Dandenong Council at the moment?
Yeah, look, I feel compelled to fight it because I think, it's really dangerous in terms of free speech. As political actors, councillors have the right to free speech. In fact, we all do. So I find it really distressing from that perspective, but also, yeah, in terms of are they applying this across the board? So I feel compelled to fight it, and I am, speaking to legal representatives right now, looking at our options, and I feel really strongly I want to take this to be tested in a legal context, and to see where that lands, because we're seeing our institutions falling every day, and we may get onto the university sector, but these institutions are supposed to be politically neutral. They're not supposed to be, active political actors, if you like. And so if we see a whole government sector start to fall, it's really, really consequential. And I also received an invitation that week, actually, that this was published, inviting me to an all expense paid conference in the Gold Coast. To attend, I think it's a 3-day conference on anti-Semitism.
I'm
So,
surprised you're on that mailing list, Rhonda.
yeah, I was surprised too. I was kind of I was almost tempted to go, right? Just just to be devil's advocate and really to see how it goes, because what's the expectation if somebody flies you up there, gives you 3 days in luxury accommodation and so on? What's the expectation that you come away with? Are we all then supposed to make determinations and policy in the light of one group, and privilege one group, as Gillian Seagull would like us to? And, is that going to be the whole sector? Because this particular conference was inviting 200 mayors and councillors, but I assume they're going to have, ongoing conferences as well. So, we're really in a very extraordinary time. Time like no other, I think.
It's quite strange. Yeah, like there's this kind of fancy conference at the Goldie, and all these councillors who usually go to fancy conferences at the Goldie every now and then are just gonna like sneak up to this one like any other one and sort of come back home not expecting any business as usual. And I want to sort of maybe touch on this at some point about the disconnect of the elite, who do rise up through the ranks and quite often inhabit spaces in our local government as councillors, and there is a bit of a ideological freedom to being a councillor. And I'd sort of like to know how some of these are expressed by people who may be a little bit more favourable to Zionism, and how there might be a little bit of a veil being torn a little bit from some of these councillors, and the way that they might sort of interact with their communities and with some of the issues at hand. So is there evidence of this amongst councillors that you see where there are conflicts of interest ideologically that kind of come out in a little bit more of a unique way as opposed to other areas of politics?
Yeah, well, I think that the kind of elegant concept, if you like, of local government is we have 11 representatives, and each one of us will have our own perspective, and that's kind of how it works. We all come with very diverse views, and the community have elected us. So whatever our views are, the community sees their interests in that, and they elect it. So it is important that we have a diversity there, and if some of those views are aligned with Zionism, that in itself is fine. But it's when you have a whole sector being influenced to privilege one group, that's when it starts to be concerning. And we have a very high Islamic population here. We have a very high Middle Eastern population. We have 70% of people here are first, second generation, so everyone is from somewhere. So who's not going to be heard in that if we're starting to get a dominance of just one group, regardless of what that group is? Even if it was an Islamic perspective, that we're all going to the Gold Coast, just to consider an Islamic perspective, that would be a problem too. So, I think the real concern is that I guess we're quasi politicians, more community, actors really, but we are able to hold our views. I was a Greens councillor up until a couple of weeks ago. Of course, I'm, going to have perspective around environment and grassroots democracy, and 8 of the 11 councillors are Labor, so they're going to have Labor views as well. That's okay. But it has to be a diversity of views. The concern is if we start to have this overlayer of one dominant perspective that is influencing everything we do, and that by its nature is excluding most of our community. That's a real problem. That's a massive problem. And also,
Totally.
just to finish off, if our executive is going rogue, and in an unauthorised sense, adopting HERA and implementing it, that's another dimension that's really concerning as well.
And it probably doesn't help adding to that if there are councillors with that disproportionate sort of ability to wield power, also disproportionately representing the interests of a group that don't really represent where you're even from. And so, yeah, this organisational lockstep that seems to be going in place from the executives at councils to hospitals to universities is an incredible thing to behold. And you often wonder, who arbitrates over this kind of over this trajectory, this sort of cadence of power and control, and what's acceptable as far as in tolerating this Zionist entity that is pushing and exerting influence over our entire society. So you have spoken about your local Dandenong's Middle Eastern community and some of the issues the community's facing due to this Gaza crisis. So how has the conflict influenced your local government priorities and community engagement? How are you seeing things changing, and how are people relating with you on the coalface?
So from the very get-go, our community was deeply, deeply affected. I was talking to people who were losing direct family members. One person lost over 60 members of their family, intergenerational members, just in one bombing in one building. Others were, had, people who were insulin dependent die because they couldn't get the insulin. There was story after story after story. And so, this community has been deeply, deeply affected, very directly, which is why, I put up that ceasefire motion in 2023. And, it was really interesting because when we put that up, we had something like 1,500 people attend that meeting. They were spilled, right out into the town square and watching it, the meeting from a screen up there. And when it passed, and it was very, very fraught, it was a very, very tense, incredibly tense time. But we stopped the meeting, went outside, and I can remember, all I remember of that day was the emotion, where people, really stoic people who have been through a lot in their lives, like really, really strong individuals. And there was just this massive, outpouring of emotions. Like I've never actually been around anything like that. It was like cracking open something that was, was just like this volcanic kind of emotion, because people had been under so much stress for so long, worried about relatives, every day, checking to see if they were still alive, just the stress on that community. And so that's never wavered. So we have had, that ongoing stress all through this time. So, people have been under this enormous stress for 22 months. I mean, everyone has, but people who are directly affected, that have direct people, people here who even in Lebanon and in Syria and the other areas that Israel has bombed, Tehran, and so, to be around that means you have to talk about it. You have to show solidarity, because that's what your job is as a representative. And that's what I've been trying to do for 22 months. And that's why I'm also personally very driven, because it's the greatest humanitarian crisis in my lifetime, and probably all our lifetimes. So for all those reasons, it's important to keep talking about it and not to pretend it's not happening. And I frequently talk about it in meetings, and just expressing solidarity, because I don't want us to pretend this is not happening, and pretend that people in this community are not directly suffering, and be that voice. And we've had local protests, and I spoke at the Monash encampments. I spoke at a lot of the Palestinian protests, because that's what you should do if you're a representative. You should be the voice for all the pain and all the enormous distress in our community. So, yeah, that's what we should be doing.
There's a palpability that can be felt in the community. I live in Melbourne's north, and there's a large Arabic community out here, and you can feel it down at the local shops. You can see it. The hopes and the hopelessness ebbing and flowing over this prolonged period of time. And it really does leave this kind of this chilling, indelible mark on society, and people are dragging their feet out there. People that are directly affected by this, this prolonged genocide, and the hopelessness that comes with it. So you do see this pain every day in the people that you're sort of elected to represent. How do you, how do you advocate for these people and for these concerns from your community when there are such obstructive obstacles within the way, at a state and federal level?
I think that this is. I feel like I've woken up into a different world. I don't recognise the world that has kind of eventuated from this, as you say, prolonged genocide. It's a world. It's very dystopian. It's very dystopian, and as you know, I think I've been fundamentally changed by it, and I think a lot of people have. And so, when you say, "How do I, represent them?" I think that the things I believed in before this genocide, I kind of don't believe in them anymore. I did believe in our representative government system. I did believe that if enough people mobilised, if enough people, stood up, spoke up, contacted their politicians, marched, petitioned, if enough people did that, our leaders would respond. But we have seen the opposite.
We've got hundreds
And
of thousands of people, out there week in, week out for so long. The public opinion is so starkly skewed to one way. And yes, it's insane to wake up every morning to see these children butchered and broken and now starving to death in this manner. And we have to see this sort of political
I
tap
think
dance.
it's really affecting a lot of people's mental health. It's an excruciating powerlessness that I think we're all feeling, and that's not the world I thought I was in. To be honest with you, I'm 61 years old. I've been around for a while. I thought we lived in what was, not a perfect democracy, but I thought it was, had the basic elements of a democracy. But you see around the world, people are marching in numbers that I've never known before. People are screaming every single day on social media, on anything they can, find a voice on. And yet we are just this deafening it's almost an indifference to the genocide, indifference to our begging and pleading. And, I think if I believed I was in a democracy before, I don't believe that now. I strongly see that we are, it is an oligarchy, that our leaders are completely owned, completely controlled. And there is no vestige of a democracy that I can see. And for the world to sit by, and, as you say, every morning we're now seeing just crumpled bones of babies. We're now seeing just I don't want to even describe it because it's so distressing. But even with that, not a word. Like, what kind of leader can stand there and be silent? How does Penny Wong even do that? How does Albo even do that? How do they live with themselves? This is beyond politics. This is a human catastrophe and human right. Human. Uh, it's even finding the words is really hard. It's so beyond what any of us could have imagined that it would happen, and then that our leaders would sit by and be complicit. It's not even just the silence. We know we're profiting from this. We know that we're still giving contracts to those that are doing it. We know that we're shipping gas and coal over there. We know that we're sending arms over there. We know we're so deep in it. We know that Pine Gap providing vital intel, and we're not allowed to even talk about it. And then you start to get actors like the council, the CEO, and the university sector counselling people, shutting you down for calling out, the murder, the shooting, the bombing, the killing of children and mothers, the distress. The distress of the parents when you see them, holding their dead child day after day. Wow, it's
The corporate
a lot.
sociopathy that has is everywhere has also run straight through Canberra, and I think like there's these kind of like political chips that they look at on this sort of this unconscionable table, and they move these chips around rain, hail, or shine. It's sort of this political this political kind of dance, but they don't quite understand that it's not these equations, it's not these little like deflector shields that they put up in front of them, generic deflector shields that they put up in front of every issue, and they kind of barge through them according to some like focus group. This is the unique crisis of our time, and it is breaking the soul of Western nations every day that we sort of move forward and dither and make excuses. And something as simple as reprimanding an ambassador, and freezing military and economic trade and connection with Israel. Something that has quite a insignificant impact on our economy. And just everything makes sense to pause this and set into motion a new way of doing things in the West that is about using more than words to push Israel down a pathway. And we would have thought that Albo, the Parliamentary Friends of Palestine founder, might have mustered the courage now with his Chifley-like, mandate that he has there, but he can't muster the courage. And I want to ask you a little bit about, your time at the Greens. I was talking about a political party then, talking politics. Let's talk about the Greens and your years at the Greens. Essentially, I read somewhere that you cited that the politics was pretty cooked, in quotation marks there. So what factors led to your decision to leave the party?
So, yeah, I mean, I think politics generally is pretty cooked. And I have nothing but good things to say about the Greens. And I was there for about 8 years. I enormously admire people in there, and, they give so much of their lives. And proudly, they were, standing against this genocide from day one, and I'll always be proud that I was part of a party that did that. And I have nothing but good things to say about them. And there is nothing, I'm not at all critical, the Greens. And, thank God we have one party that, stands up for things like human rights. But I have just been so affected by this that I'm not the person that joined the Greens, 8 years ago. I'm not that person anymore. And because the Greens, their whole ethos is around, getting power in a democratic system and getting elected and being a player within a political system. I just don't really believe in that system anymore. And I don't believe that it's representative. I don't believe it's fair. And I don't want to stay there and bring any negativity to the Greens by what I say. I want to be free to say, I think the whole system is cooked now. I did stand in the recent federal election, and the money the major parties had, each one of them around 3 mil, Labor and Liberal, and that changes things. You can buy elections. You can really, when you have an enormous amount of money, you can really change people's minds and influence them. And so what I believe is happening, people are buying power in this way, and then they are working on behalf of the oligarchs. So it is this facade of democracy that we're seeing. And, I think it's great we have a compulsory voting system, but really we're being kind of dragged along to play the game and pretend this is consequential when our local leader doesn't work for us and doesn't reflect our views and doesn't listen to us, but he is listening to the oligarchs and doing their bidding for them. And this extends to climate change and all these critical issues, wealth distribution and so on. So I left because I just don't believe that we have a fair parliamentary system. That's just me. That's just where I am now, and that's where I've moved, in 22 months. And so the Greens are fine. The Greens are great. I've shifted. That's all.
So I think a lot of people are sort of without a country or without a party right now, across the spectrum of age as well. And there've been a lot of people that put their, blood, sweat, and tears into political movements. Have really done a lot of work, trying to build a dream with especially on the progressive side of politics. But you mentioned that people power doesn't have an effect anymore, as far as you're concerned. You see how the money can buy elections, how, protests can be held in the streets every week in designated areas, and no one's going to listen to them, as long as they stay within the lines. So where does that leave us? I mean, I have a copy of Thomas Paine's Common Sense in the toilet that I read, from time to time. One of the best toilet reads you can get. And apart from reading revolutionary pamphlets and getting frustrated, what is next if we're living in a country?
It's a good question to ask, because one of the reasons I also wanted to move away from the Greens is because I don't want to pretend I've got the answers. And when it was interesting, because I had a chat to Janet Rice when I resigned. Janet gave me a call. It's like, what the hell? And I'm like, Janet, I have so much respect for you, and you've dedicated your life. And every time Janet talks, she talks about the movement. But Rhonda, we have to mobilise, and we have to, it's for the movement, and it's for the. And I'm like, yeah, that's your view of the world now, Janet. That's always been your view of the world. I don't see that any kind of movement is a solution right now. And so when you say, what do we do? I want the freedom to say, I don't fucking know. because nothing seems to be working. Nothing we are doing is shifting this one iota. And if child slaughter is not the line where we can shift our leaders to act, then what is? So I don't know. And I'm just, I just feel like we're in this really dark time. And I hate to be, just to go and slit your throat or something, but I just want to be honest about it. I don't want to pretend that anything I could do is going to shift anything. I don't want the farce. If we are in 1984, I feel like every day is a page of 1984. If we are in this fascist controlled state where we're seeing, McCarthyism in local government, where we're seeing, this enormous control, watching Starmer arrest elderly doctors and priests and lock them into jail. I mean, where are we? UK, that's a UK. Locking people up for standing against the slaughter of children. When we're there, like, what does work? I mean, I have enormous respect for people like, I don't know if you watch Medea in the US, who's got the Pink Party. And, she's a Jewish woman that spends her days.
Oh, Medea Benjamin.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes, yes.
And haranguing, members of Congress. And I just have so much respect for her. And I think, what an extraordinary woman. And so much respect that she keeps doing it, day after day, day after day after day.
There seems to be checks and balances. There are bills and rights, but we give America so much crap. But there's more freedom in America to express yourself than there currently is in the UK and their colonies. And quite often we see people like Benjamin. We see independent senators and people say like Thomas Massey and things like that, sort of standing up and having these really strong, firm positions and platforms that are against the status quo. In Australia, we struggle to sort of find these people making these positions. I mean, I wonder how Simon Crean's Labor Party would have handled this genocide right now. If a couple of those old Trotsky backbenchers would have been firing up a little bit more or something like that. And this is an observation I write about a lot, and I might be completely wrong about it because I'm not a psychotherapist or a psychoanalysis person, but I look at these personality types, this corporate sociopathy. These kind of nihilists, these corporate nihilists that now inhabit every section of our society. They used to be, in the private sector, but then they saw these big fat jobs with, in these high trust societies of local government, of the bureaucracy, of the public service. And now we have these same kind of type of people everywhere. These kind of machine people that are running departments that are in charge of our country. Do you think that this is an issue in broader Australian society? And, added to that, without those checks and balances, without those bills of rights, without that kind of unique story of freedom and speaking out, in times of woe, not as defined as other nations, do you think that's a problem that sort of, affects our society?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, when you watch Benjamin, have access to those congressmen as she chases them around the corridors, I couldn't, it's inconceivable that you would be able to do that in Australia. When was the last time anybody, just casually had a chat to Albo, and I'm going to call him Anthony Albanese, that would have that kind of access. So, yeah, Bill of Rights, we absolutely need a Bill of Rights. And I do believe that America is much better in that way. In other words, not so much. But I certainly do. I do hope we progress towards that. It's certainly overdue. But, Simon Crean, I think, would be turning in his grave. Gough would be turning in his grave. Any one of those kind of, that genuinely held, socialist, views, and believed in representation, believed in democratic kind of concepts, they would be shocked to see their party, the Labor Party, turn into this. But I look at those politicians. I don't know about you, but I look at them that, and I know they're good people, right? Like Jed Kearney, she's a nurse. These are good people. But how is it they can stay so silent? How can they just, for whatever cost, what cost your soul, as you say, how can they just not break out and speak? I'm just flabbergasted at their allowing themselves to be so controlled at this time.
And why can't the party give them a space to feel confident to be able to make that kind of speech if they want to? I mean, I think that's the important thing. There are lots of people out there in politics that are appalled by what's going on here. And if there was some ability for them to, without any kind of career or reputational damage, or the ability to get that nice cushy job after retirement, it would be great to see a little bit more freedom. We see someone like Ed Husick, for example. It looked for a little while that he was almost going to be unchained to be able to say and speak what he wants and what he feels about this issue. But where is he? For the sake of party unity, you have to hide and bide. You have to play this game.
But one thing I just wanted to touch on, Joel, and you just touched on it before, I just think it's such an important issue, is around, international justice. One of the things that I'm deeply shocked about is that Labor and Penny Wong and Albo are so silent on what's happening to the International Criminal Court right now. When we're talking about justice and when we're talking about the failure of our government to act, what America is doing in strong arming. We had Reed Rubenstein the other day standing up, not even hiding it, trying and really in a mafia style kind of standover tactics, say to the ICC, you leave America alone, you leave Israel alone, or we will end you. And Microsoft cutting off, the head prosecutor's access to his email and his bank accounts. And we haven't heard one word from, Penny Wong or, the Prime Minister on that. And this rules-based order that we believe we subscribe to, the erosion of that in this conflict is so complete and so stark, and not a word from our leaders. For me, that I'm kind of interested in your thoughts about that, because I think that the cost of this conflict is so significant in corroding all our safeguards and all our kind of systems. I'm kind of interested to hear what you have to say about that.
Well, I was speaking to Warrick Pal, Professor Warrick Pal, the other week about this. And the big issue right now is that this international rules-based order suits middle powers like Australia. And right now, we need this international system to be functioning. And you're right, like it has been completely trampled. And this respect for the rule of law internationally has been ripped apart, to the point where we want to prosecute some Russian official in a criminal court, but allow the whole, cabinet of Netanyahu to sort of be able to fly over Europe on its way to visit Washington, where these planes should be brought down and these people should be arrested. So, and hearing about Karim Khan's emails being cut off and the pressure he's being put on in his private life is insane. Australia seems to have hitched itself to this dying US imperial order. It's signed away checks every single decade, whether it be the neoliberal reforms of Keating, which put us into that, that hyper US economic world, and then moving forward to the global war on terror from Howard, and into this really bleak and dark kind of period we're in now. And it sort of adds to the strangling kind of hopelessness that is going around everywhere. Because when you're seeing Washington and to some extent Penny Wong leaning and trampling on these global institutions, either by direct words and threats, or in Penny Wong's case, kind of acquiescence and turning a blind eye and feigned ignorance. Yeah, this is a very dangerous time for Australia, and it feels like the wheels have really come off, and the old muscle memory and language and circuitry of Australia holding onto this international system and run by the US is outdated, to say the least. And it is heading us down a sort of pathway where our sovereignty and our soul is being ripped out day by day, week by week.
I think you've just articulated that so well, but and I'm being very bleak this interview. One of the things I am really inspired about is the way the global South, as we frame them, are responding, and we are seeing that as cooked as the whole, the powerful countries are, countries that are really standing up and really taking action and taking the high ground, the moral high ground, and showing up. We had the Hague group meet last week, 30 countries get together and just 5-point emphatic list. You just do this now, just act, just get in there, just stop the genocide. The only possibly positive thing I can see out of this is that we see this permanent shift, to the global South, where they start to be more, they start to collaborate more and start to show their strength more, and that we do have this shift away from these. America's in decline, clearly, but we'll see that accelerated shift to the global South, and to me, that's the only really hopeful thing on the horizon right now. And the countries that have stood, stood up to the ICJ, like Ireland and South Africa and Spain. Spain have been amazing. These countries are showing great leadership now, and I'm just hoping that what comes out of that is they coalesce into we see a new power block and a new world emerging, that is a world that we can live with. So I think that's probably one of the positive things I see right now.
Yeah, it's like there's little wiggles of hope sort of moving through this sort of bleak landscape. And with Australia right now, it feels like, I've mentioned this with previous guests, the musical chairs that is Australia. We seem to be the last one every single time to these global statements, to these incremental, slow shifts towards reprimanding Israel. We're always the last one to the table. And I wonder how much it's affected our global reputation with, because with the smoke and mirrors and the Crocodile Dundee and I don't know, all the land and the produce and the happy beaches, we projected something, I think, to the world, which we may necessarily never had, but we have projected this image to the world, this reputation and this prestige, which has served us well over the years. And I think now we don't quite understand the reckoning that comes with actually losing that prestige in the way that we have. If we look across to Indonesia and Malaysia at the moment, there might be, smiles and handshakes, but behind the scenes there is a recognition that Australia has been involved in the dullest and most horrific end of US imperialism in Israel and Gaza. So yeah, at the very least, it'd be great to stop selling F-35 parts. That would be just a start. Then maybe even just like sending a letter to the ambassador, telling him to cut it out, and then maybe just some kind of like statement saying killing children is completely wrong and Australia won't engage with Israel until it stops. That's not unreasonable. And I don't think it's going to harm Australia's potential to survive on this planet just by taking this position. And I want to talk about how conflicting issues within political parties affect outcome. This election hasn't been a good one for the Greens, losing, what was it, 4 seats in the House of Representatives there, 3 out of 4. So you know, there is this concerted attack to keep the Greens down, to stop them from being a viable third option. And with Adam Bent gone, you know, there was a lot of talk about after the election that Labor was so cheeky and sort of coming up and sort of saying, hey, you've weaponized the Gaza conflict. It's because of this that we've got this mandate, that you guys all suck and you've got nothing out of this. And, you know, this was echoed throughout the media, you know, all the soothsayers, you know, the Costamarises of the world all brought it up as this big sort of point. But it doesn't feel like that completely on the ground here. And I want to know how the Greens, you know, critics will say that their support for Gaza was the main issue for their poor result. But I've got different sort of perspectives on that. And I'd like to know what you think was sort of the main contributing factors to the poor outcome in this election.
Look, it's ironic. And I had Julian Hill, who I was running against, accuse me of, importing foreign conflicts and promoting violence since the genocide began. So their rhetoric around that, you know, has been constant. And it's ironic because they're saying we politicised this genocide when they, you know, by not acting, they're the ones that have actually politicised. The Greens never saw this as a political issue from day one when, Maureen Faruqi led the senators out of the Senate. It was always a humanitarian issue. Imagine even having to argue this politically. I mean, this is a human rights issue, an extraordinary human rights issue. And, you know, to be frank, now that I don't have the constraints of being in party, I just want to say, you know, I want to take the Elon Musk's great words when he was at that conference, when he was just, go fuck yourself, because the Greens never said we're going to win an election because we're standing against babies being slaughtered. For fuck's sake, like Greens always stood against a genocide because it's a fucking genocide, and whether it won us or lost us an election, who gives a fuck? Because that's what we believe in. We believe in human rights. And you can't not do that. If you believe in something, you can't not speak up about it. So if it wins seats or lose seats, you know, fuck it. Because that's the heart, that comes from the heart of the Greens. They genuinely believe in human rights. And I know that's shocking. It's shocking now to believe that a party can just believe in something and not have that measured in terms of its political value or advantage. I know that's deeply shocking because we're so used to that thinking now.
But the way
But
the information you know, surrounding it was sort of blown up into the air by the legacy media here, was that the Greens failed to sort of screw down into some viable policy issues that are affecting Australia. They missed opportunities on housing, and the criticism around Gaza was that they focused too much on the identity politics of Gaza, I suppose, you know, as well. You know how that's sort of how they see the Greens, right? It's sort of like this was another like badge that the Greens slapped on and paraded out in the street. But as you say, this is just a human rights issue in a country that, you know, pertains to uphold human rights at an international level, regardless of the political outcome. You know, was Gaza an issue that the Australian voting base punished the Greens for?
you know what, like, you know, we can sit here and speculate. The Greens vote overall was up. In the southeast here, you know, every seat here increased our vote. But it is a part of our, the way that our system works, that didn't eventuate in the number of seats, of course, that we would have liked. So, I really take issue that the Greens didn't do well. But again, that's the way that the mainstream media always frame it.
I really appreciate having you on board. It's great to meet you in the flesh, and I hope, your future in the independent political space really kind of pays off for you and reverberates and helps to add more pressure on that levee to break. So yeah, thank you for being here.
Well, it's just been such a pleasure. Thank you so much.